Okay, Paula, yes.
I was just thinking the other day, I was kind of, but I was wondering if you know of any like women philosophers, and maybe why there's not really.
You wouldn't like my answer. Jamie probably would mind my answer, but she wouldn't say much. Kendra, of course, will never say anything that will contradict me. Sarah would also remain quiet. Rebecca may be a little agitated, run out of this room steaming. I don't know how you would react. There are a few things when it comes to women and reflection and philosophy. And I don't know how much of it really has to do with biology, how much it has to do with sociology, nature and nurture. Since, for the most part, society has been created by men, all the branches of it. You know, women really haven't had much of a say. I'm not talking about, you know, pockets of women here or there who were in charge of their tribe and men were submissive to them. For the majority of our history, men have had a very heavy hand in just creating events. There have been a few women here or there who have had a voice, but their voice, I think, for the most part, has been always contaminated by men's voice and thinking and just the way things have been. Also, women don't really make good philosophers. Women make great students, but they make awful teachers. Okay, so let's move on then. Imagine for a moment that, forgive me for this analogy, that you and I are married and we have 2 or 3 or 4 kids. As a woman, biologically speaking, you have no choice but from the age of 10 or 11, without perhaps being aware of it, you have this deep need for security. I mean, you're made to become pregnant and become a mother. And it's very difficult to go to school, have a job, and take care of your children. You need a Peter, you need a rock on whom you can kind of create your environment, and that's a man, for better or for worse. So, as a woman, there comes a point in your life where you have to submit, you have to be submissive to the person who brings home the money. That's the man. Value judgments aside, you know, as a woman, you need someone to depend on so you can raise your kids relatively well. Okay. Also, at a certain point in your pregnancy, it's really difficult to move around. You know, your emotions are all over the place. Your thinking, for the most part, revolves around your emotions. And you're really looking for someone to create stability, physical stability in your life. Okay? As a woman, your entire life is going to be revolving, depending what sort of a woman you are. If you've had a relatively healthy childhood upbringing, you had both parents on ground, you depended on both of them. They kind of gave you a healthy set of emotions and thoughts. You had a good relationship with them. You were ambitious, but the nature of your ambitions had to do with taking care of the house, helping your mother, taking care of your father, those things. The notion of individualism wasn't really too much part of your world. important factor. Because if you're a woman and you have a father missing in your life, what's going to happen is, I mean, you'll do the best you can with your mom, but you also know as you are growing up that you need to fend for yourself. Men, for the most part, are jerks, you know, so you help your mom. You also want to be a mother. You also want to be a CEO to a company. That's a very, very different woman as opposed to the one who is very community oriented. You become pregnant and your emotions and your thoughts revolve around how you want to raise your kids. Okay. You may feel imposition in regards to your children. They're coming into your life and they're ruining your life. But that's not going to last very long because eventually you're going to want to take care of them the best you can. As a man, my story is very, very different than yours. Remember, our relationship was founded on physical attraction. I don't know what I'm walking into, but all I know is that I like you, you like me, and things are kind of blossoming. Then one day you come to me and you say, I'm pregnant. I don't really know what that means. I have some fantasies, but I don't really know what that means. You begin to love all the movements that are taking place in your belly. You know, I don't have access to that, but I can fantasize about them. I can even have a good time going with you to Home Depot, you know, buying beds, mattresses if they have any. You know, or go to Berkeley at the end of the semester looking for junk that people leave outside their apartments so they can bring home. And then what's going to happen is, initially it'll be fun going to Kaiser and doing the checkups, sonograms and all that. I'm going to be waking up 5-10 times a night. You will as well, but your reaction to being interrupted by your child is very different than me being interrupted. You know, I can be nice the first couple of times. I can run around the house, you know, holding this kid in my arms, trying to shut him or her up. Changing diapers may be fun. Giving them a bath may be fun the first few, maybe weeks. Then something about me is going to change. I'm going to feel frustration, anxiety, hatred, because my time is being taken. My emotions are being taken. And I'm going to kind of ask, whisper to myself, why did I get involved with this? I'm going to hate my life. And I'm going to look at everything from the outside. And that's my privilege. I can't be wrapped up in emotions that are connected to kids in a positive way. I'm going to be wrapped up in negative emotions. Why? I hate my wife, I hate my children, I have no time to spend with my friends, or I can't do my own stuff like play video games. If I happen to be American, I can't smoke, I can't drink, you know, my life sucks, all that stuff. I don't see myself within the context of a family life, but my time being kind of stolen by you and my kids. Because I am given that objectivity, that distance, I can look at my life and how it has impacted my youth, my energy, my time, my emotions, and my thought process in ways that it'll never happen to you. Okay, so I can be a good student of observing what happens to a man within the context of being with a woman, being a husband, being a father. You don't have that luxury. Because the moment you sit and think about this stuff, your kid is going to say, listen, I need my butt to be cleaned, my diaper to be changed. You know, you need to send me to a good school. You need to feed me, nurse me. I don't have those things. Okay? And I think with philosophy, and it depends on what kind of philosophy you're talking about. There are great many number of good women philosophers out there. But it all depends on how you wish to define philosophy. If you want to define philosophy as love and then wisdom, well, as a woman, you need to be detached from the emotion of love. So you can examine it really, really well. And by detached, I mean you need to be consumed by it. At the same time, be pushed out of it, to be able to look at it, examine it, take notes, and come to certain conclusions. Okay. Then when it comes to wisdom, it's going to be a journey into hell, because the thing about wisdom is that we're not talking about data. We're not talking about information. We're not talking about packing your brain space with knowledge. Because before you get to wisdom, you have a good amount of data. I mean, you come to this class, Paula, with your history. And the thing about your history is that you have pockets of events created by history. Okay? Now, you need a culture, you need a filter that kind of interprets, processes these events in a certain way. That's the task of a culture. So an event happens, your culture gets into play and says, okay, this is how we're going to process this event. That processing factor becomes a tradition. Okay? That tradition comes up with certain conclusions to what this event means. Okay? Now, that tradition creates certain rituals. For example, if you go to the Eskimo country, the Inuits, all right, it's a very harsh environment and mothers usually nurse their kids almost up to about 6 or 7 years. Now imagine if you have 2 or 3 or 4 kids, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a lot of kids to nurse, okay? And you always have to also be moving around. And remember our conversation about being a nomad. A nomad it's like a woman or a man who have had a checkered past. So they don't really know how to remain faithful to any one person. They spend some time and then they move. Before the history becomes very serious, before they are forced to commit, before that period comes, they move. So they don't create a very bona fide psychological narrative with their companion. That's one thing you need to know. So for those of you in this class who have come from, say, a broken environment, say your parents kind of divorced at the age of 2 or 3, something about you may not know it now, but if you pay close attention to your romantic relationships, you either depend so much on the other person, okay, where you suffocate them, where they want to leave, and then friction or conflict happen and eventually things go bad, right? Or what you do is you learn early on that no human being should ever be dependent upon. Okay, so you spread yourself out. 10% to Kendra, 10% to Sarah, 10% to Matthew, 10% to Rebecca. Should Kendra go away, I'm going to take my 10%, give it to Jamie. So no single human being can devastate me, you see. And that's what a nomad is. And so when they have, for example, parents that they have to migrate because of the climate, they happen to be 80 or 90, they have difficulty walking, their culture, their tradition, the way they interpret life is that I'm going to leave my father who is 80 in the snow to die. If I have a kid who is 4 and 6 and 7, I have a 2-year-old who also needs to be nursed, I'm going to leave the 2-year-old in the snow to die. No shame, no regret, no remorse, no sin, no God who is going to condemn you. So every culture creates its own unique software as to how they're going to deal with the disasters of life. Okay? Now, you have come here with your own culture, with your own history. Some of it has been imposed upon you, not your own making. Okay? Remember when your mom eats food, when you're still in her belly, and you're from Chile, right? So in Chile, you have specific kinds of food with specific kind of tastes. Those taste buds are imposed upon you. And the more diverse your mother's taste buds are, the more diverse yours are going to be. If your mom only eats Cheerios, you're going to come out having profoundly impoverished taste buds. Most likely. Okay. Now, again, if you're able to stretch your memories back to our conversations, so philo is love, and Sophia is wisdom. You will never, ever, ever, ever have direct contact with wisdom. So you can never fall in love with wisdom. That's impossible. What you will fall in love with is oftentimes a man named Socrates. It could be a woman as well, okay? But most often, the container that holds wisdom is a masculine figure, is a male figure, okay? Now, what you do is you fall in love with Socrates. Now, you need to understand every beholder of wisdom, every container of wisdom has their own culture, their own tradition, their own set of rituals. Okay? Now, this is the culture that you must inherit. But for Socrates to be able to give you his culture, his history, his tradition, his rituals, he has to get rid of yours. Okay? Now, why is it that women become such great students for this? Because women can love in ways that a man can never love. That's one of the mysteries, I think, of life. Okay? Now, the downside of this is this. When a woman loves someone like Socrates, initially it is what we call eros. She begins to romanticize the relationship. Okay? And there is nothing wrong with it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with romanticizing the relationship. And one of the ways, for example, that this eros or romanticization of the relationship becomes even more intense is when you desire to be around the body of Socrates more and more and more often. It just gels it. Okay? Now, Socrates has a different agenda. Okay? Now, you may enjoy his body. Okay? You may enjoy his history. But what he really wants to give you is philo, his intellect. Now, that is going to be a very, very difficult move on your part. Because to understand the mind of Socrates, you have to remove yourself from the emotions. That is something that men can do really, really well. Okay? But it's such a difficult kind of transition for women. Okay? So what you have a lot of great women philosophers who have a good amount of data, good amount of information, maybe even love for someone like Socrates. But they can never be a good container because why? Well, getting them detached from their emotions very, very difficult. Then having them become interested in the mind of Socrates. And to become interested in the mind of Socrates, you need to adopt his culture. I am 60. I am from Iran. I come from a culture that's about 4,000 or 5,000 years old. I am fluent in my language. I know my history really, really well. I know poetry, Persian poetry really well. I'm a musician of some sort. Okay? And I put all of that stuff in my philosophy. It's not enough for you to just come to this class and hear me speak. That's not enough. It's not enough for you to have eros. And for me to move you from eros to philo, I need to push you out. Okay? I say, come to the office, come to the house, let's sit, let's have coffee. Then you're going to get really, really attached. And you need this. Okay? Because without attachment, there is no gelling. There is no intimacy. There is no bonding. When you become attached, you become a customer. A customer who's emotionally involved with the products that Socrates has. Okay? Now remember, you can't be attached if you're not attracted. All right? It's very, very difficult for men to even get to this place. Okay? Now this may have a biological root because men, for the most part, from the beginning of dawn, we have been so profoundly aggressive in protecting the things that we like, in going out there and killing animals, being butchers. Okay? Women, for the most part, their psychology have been protected, whether it's been biological or sociological, whether men came to realize that the women, for whatever the reasons are, maybe they're just physically not as strong, they had to be protected. So whatever the case may be, men are wired to be aggressive and dominating. Our egos are enormous. Women have a much more difficult time walking away from their kids. Men, on the other hand, have a much easier time walking away. They are less emotionally attached. Okay? The conflict that this creates, okay? Because you're intoxicated with the sort of love that is intense. To fall in love with someone's intellect, you need to be able to stand back and simply observe. And it is a desert because you're not going to feel much except the negative emotions such as anger and hatred, isolation, alienation, and it's very, very, very difficult. So what usually happens, most women get to the eros, okay? They may get glimpses of Socrates' mind. Now, the thing about Socrates' mind is that it's housed in agape, God. Okay. Now, if you happen to have come from a secular culture, Paula, that your language is not seasoned with religion or spiritual vocabulary, okay, if your emotions are not seasoned with religion and spirituality, the task of Socrates becomes enormous because not only does he have to get rid of your, say, cultural history, he must also create a different set of language inside you. Okay? And for that to happen, you need to kind of be taught language of the symbols. That every story has 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 layers. And you have to use a different set of senses inside you. Again, very, very difficult. But the point of it is, we've had a lot of women philosophers, but because they lack the ability, it's not always true, but I think mostly true, but because they lack this ability of being detached and sitting back, observing, going through, as St. John of the Cross would say, dark night of the soul, it becomes very, very difficult for them. And the truth is, you don't need to have great women philosophers. I think it's partly the issue that modern people have, you know, that began perhaps in the 1960s or 70s, you know, with the dawn of feminism, for example. We also need to kind of respect women's mind and what they have done and what they have contributed. I mean, it may be good in different parts of life, but when it comes to wisdom, I mean, that's my position. It may be wrong, but I can say it may rub some of you the wrong way. But I think, and remember, creation doesn't make very many Socrates, and creation doesn't create very many Platos. Okay, so the idea of even a single woman in like 100 years' time is able to fall in love with Socrates, and then go through the conflict. I love you, I hate you, I love you, I hate you. And then there are a couple of things that also happen when this probably has nothing to do with your question. When you meet someone like Socrates, you fall into this thing called the call. Something about intuition wakes up. You say, I have this strange feeling. And the problem with the call is that the call connects you to the soul of Socrates. But you have no idea why or what it is. All you know is that you feel a little funny every time you leave his presence, okay? It's something that used to be said about Socrates, that whenever we leave Socrates, he takes something away from us and gives us something better, though we don't know what that is, okay? The problem with the call is that because of the god, eudaimonia, that lives inside Socrates, your desires for the iron, your desires for the bronze and the silver, they vanish. And the mere presence, the mere glance of Socrates creates this conflict. Okay. Hello, Bridget. The issue becomes even more complicated if, for example, you are a married woman. If you are not married but you have a boyfriend, detached, or you have children. Because what's going to happen, all of a sudden, your love for your companion is something you are committed and responsible for. It doesn't have much emotions here. Because after a while, when you stay with someone, emotions go away and responsibility set in. Okay? When it comes to Socrates, you have intense emotions. Now your love has two branches. In one branch, you have a history with John, okay? That history creates psychological attachments, okay? Future, past, guilt, all those emotions that all of us in this class have faced. Should I, shouldn't I? The emotion you have with Socrates is vague, it's dark, it's gloomy, you don't understand, it creates a good amount of confusion, and yet there is something about it that propels you forward. Okay? And now your love has two branches. And the only way this will be figured out is time. Time will tell if you'll go back to your child, okay? You'll go back to your husband or your wife, okay? Or you'll just follow Socrates. If you are a man, it's much easier to walk away from everything and simply follow Socrates. No shame, no guilt. Once in a while, you'll probably sit in your bed and say, really, I just left my wife and kids for this guy, and he looks ugly. Okay. If you're a woman, the components of shame and guilt kind of haunt you on a daily basis. Okay. Men, for the most part, get close, but not too close. If you, for example, read the Gospel of Mark, when Jesus says he's going to die, all these men disciples kind of sit around and say, okay, when Jesus dies, who's going to take over? Who's going to be the new Messiah, so to speak? Okay. Women don't do that. You could also look at women and men in two different ways. That some people have emotions that are masculine. Some people have emotions that are feminine. Okay. Women who have masculine emotions, whether it's temperamental, that's their hardware, okay, that they came out of their mother's womb just being masculine. Some women are made masculine by their social environment. An absent father, a very harsh physical environment, okay? And you can have the reverse for men as well. As long as your emotions are feminine, and to have feminine emotions, you need to be passive. I mean, that's what feminine emotions are, passive. And when you're passive, it's like you're an empty container. Socrates fills you, you don't complain. You may have emotions, such as anger and dislike and confusion, but for the most part, you receive well. If you have a masculine emotion, okay, he may give you things, but he will fight, and eventually just walk your way.